If you've ever felt shamed, put down, or otherwise made to feel bad simply for being vegan, then you've been subject to outgroup derogation. Stick around to find out what that is and how to counteract it to protect both your personal emotional well-being and our movement as a whole. Welcome and welcome back if you're a regular. I'm Anita, the Vegan Mindset Coach, and I created Unstoppable Vegans to help us survive and thrive in a non-vegan world while also being effective advocates for animals and for ourselves. I do these trainings weekly inside our Facebook community, and as of recently also share the recordings to YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook, drop your comments below and also any questions that you might have below the video. And if you're watching on YouTube, commenting is turned off for you, but you will find all the ways to contact me on my channel. So let's get started. Today, we're diving into the third cognitive distortion used by carnism to shut down veganism as a justice movement. And this distortion is called outgroup derogation. This tactic is being deployed aggressively by animal industries and by all the mouthpieces that they fund, be that media or politicians or other institutions. And this is all part of the backlash against veganism that we're witnessing right now. And this backlash is happening because veganism is succeeding. Carnism has recognized veganism as a fast-growing counter-movement that threatens its dominance. Now, backlash, while it doesn't feel great, is a sign of progress for our movement. So, why does carnism use cognitive distortions, and why is it important for us as vegans to know about them? Now, it's because carnism is a dominant oppressive system. Oppressive systems rely on cognitive distortions to maintain their power. Cognitive distortions are simply biased and inaccurate beliefs that cause the people within those systems to accept the system without questioning it. And this is crucial. Carnism must distort reality because if people saw clearly the suffering, the environmental destruction, the injustice, they would reject carnism. So carnism cannot survive free choice that is informed by awareness of the truth. Therefore, it manufactures distorted choice by distorting people's reality. Now, in my last two videos, I explored the first two cognitive distortions carnism uses to invalidate veganism and to shut down our message. In those videos, I also covered strategies to help non-vegans to recognize their own cognitive distortions and start to see veganism as a justice movement that they can actually support. Today, we're moving into the third distortion. The third distortion that is used to invalidate us as vegans and our movement, veganism. And that distortion is designed to make us and our movement look abnormal, unnatural, and unnecessary. This distortion is called outgroup derogation. Outgroup derogation is a psychological mechanism used by oppressive systems to generate disgust, hostility, and aggression towards members of a non-dominant group, and especially the members of a counter-movement. In our case, vegans. Outgroup derogation tries to turn us into a group that is outside of normal, acceptable society. And it does this by framing veganism as abnormal, unnatural, and unnecessary. These are the three myths that underpin outgroup derogation. Now, it says we're abnormal because vegans think and act differently to normal people, and that's considered inherently bad. Difference is framed as a threat to social order. We're considered unnatural because what we want is presented as being bad or unhealthy. Bad for the planet, right? More land to grow those crops that we vegans all want to eat, right? Bad for the animals because of, well, crop deaths, Duh. And, while we know this is the opposite of reality, the distortion is really powerful because it taps into fear. Now, it frames us as unnecessary, or our beliefs as unnecessary, because all of the issues that we raise, that veganism solves, are reframed by carnism as solvable without the need to go vegan. It will offer solutions like higher animal welfare standards. We're all working towards those, and they're great, aren't they? Organic, free-range, regenerative farming, because, they're the magic solutions, apparently. Ethical slaughter, as if that were a thing that existed. And, of course, a whole range of technological fixes for the environmental destruction caused by animal agriculture. So we know that these solutions are false solutions, but they are effective at convincing non-vegans because they want to believe them, while at the same time they don't want to believe us. Because if they believe us, they would be compelled to change. And change is hard and scary. Change feels like a survival threat. These false solutions that they're being offered, on the other hand, don't require them to change at all. All right, so let's have a look at how out-group derogation actually works in favour of carnism, okay? So it works by shaming the non-dominant group, that is vegans. It works by elevating the dominant group, that is non-vegans, and by distorting the perceptions of each group's behaviour and its relative acceptability or validity. So let's have a look at each one of these. Shaming of the non-dominant group. Okay, so carnism shames vegans by portraying us as extreme, irrational, humorless, judgmental, even dangerous, and antisocial. Now, shame weakens confidence. Shame weakens motivation, and it weakens the ability to challenge injustice. People who are subject to shaming typically want to shrink away and hide. Now, I've heard from many of you that is how you have felt in situations where you were the only vegan and you were given a hard time by all the non-vegans around. So shame is very, very powerful, and we've got to be aware of it. On the flip side, what this cognitive distortion of out-group derogation does is it also elevates the dominant group, the non-vegans. So carnism creates narratives that portray vegans as less than non-vegans, less worthy of respect, less worthy of trust, less worthy of consideration. Carnism positions meat eaters generally as normal, right? Because they do what pretty much everyone else does. Rational, because what everyone agrees on must make sense. More trustworthy, because, well, they're not the weird outsiders. And also more authoritative, because people who do what the system says is normal and right are just automatically viewed as more authoritative. Okay, at the same time, it positions us as vegans as abnormal, irrational, untrustworthy, with our supposed hidden agendas, and also lacking authority or any credibility, because what we are saying is generally not supported by the carnistic institutions that most people consider to be trustworthy and authoritative sources of information. So this now creates a hierarchy where vegans are seen as inferior and where many non-vegans feel comfortable treating us that way. So the third way in which out-group derogation works is that it distorts the perceptions of behaviours from each of the two groups, vegans versus non-vegans. So that a non-vegan ridiculing a vegan is considered just engaging in good-natured banter, while the vegan who's subjected to this behaviour is labelled as humourless if they speak up against it. Now, if the situation were reversed, and the vegan were giving the non-vegan a hard time, the vegan would be labelled as judgmental and controlling, and the non-vegan would be viewed as the victim and supported. So in this way, carnism reframes vegan needs as unreasonable, right? The need to not be witnessing body parts being eaten in our presence to spare us from distress is seen as an unreasonable imposition on non-vegans who could never be reasonably expected to forego such activities, even for just one meal. right? And our vegan anger is reframed as inappropriate. So that is our anger at the injustice being done to non-human animals and at times to us. That anger is seen as unjustified because carnism blinds people to the injustices that we can see. And our vegan boundaries are seen as controlling. So when we set boundaries such as not participating in a meal where animals are consumed, it is framed as an attempt to punish non-vegans, right, for consuming animals, rather than seen as the attempt that it is to preserve our own emotional safety and well-being. And vegan advocacy is reframed as aggression. So when we attempt to reveal even the smallest glimpse of truth, it's often seen as an attack on non-vegans' way of life and an attempt to force them to give up the things that they care about. So this kind of reframing is classic out-group derogation. So why is the carnistic backlash intensifying right now? Why is carnism escalating its derogation tactics against vegans? Now, to me, it's explained by a quote that refers to the growth and the impact of a movement like ours. And it goes something like this. First they ignore us, then they laugh at us, then they fight us, and then we win. While we were too small to impact the dominant oppressive system, it ignored us. We were irrelevant. When it noticed us, it tried to laugh us off. We were ridiculed. Carnism hoped that would be enough to put others off from joining us. And when that didn't work, and our movement kept growing, its impact could no longer be ignored or denied. That's when the system started to see us as a threat. And that's when it started to invest time and energy in fighting us. That is where we are now. Veganism is growing fast. Don't be fooled when you hear otherwise. The data shows that we are growing and that many more people are close to joining us. Carnism, on the other hand, is losing its moral legitimacy. And it's seeing a decline in its cultural dominance. It is even starting to suffer some political losses. So when oppressive systems feel threatened like this, they intensify derogation. How do we counter out-group derogation when it's directed at us? We counter out-group derogation through creating awareness in the minds of non-vegans, creating connection with non-vegans, and through values-based communication. Okay, so I'm going to break these down over the coming points. So the first thing that we can do, and that's really, really important, is creating that awareness piece. And that simply means making the distortion of out-group derogation visible to the people who are carrying that distortion, who are not aware of it, who just believe that that's just the way it is, that vegans are just weird and they don't deserve respect. That's their distortion. We need to make them aware of it. So when people recognize the distortion, it loses its power. We can bring recognition to the distortion by simply speaking our truth. All it takes is one line. So something along the lines of, we live in a system where harming animals is normalized. So it makes sense that veganism looks abnormal, right? We're bringing attention to the reality. That awareness breaks the conditioning. The second thing we can do is we can actually rehumanize ourselves as vegans. I know that might sound a bit weird, but carnism dehumanizes vegans by making out that we are anti-human. Unfortunately, many of us do experience misanthropy at one point or another, where we genuinely feel a deep dislike for our own species. And unfortunately, this plays right into the hands of carnism, since any undesirable behavior by any vegan is quickly ascribed to all vegans, as we learned in my last video. The only way we get to counter this is by showing warmth towards our fellow humans and demonstrating a shared identity with them. It means being friendly and interested. It means stepping into our curiosity and staying out of judgment. It means showing compassion towards people and their struggles and genuinely trying to help them move into alignment with their values, which are essentially the same as ours. What we want to communicate to people is that vegans are just regular people who also happen to care about non-human animals. That contrary to popular belief, most vegans have day jobs and engage in activities other than disruptive protests, right? We are nurses, we are teachers, engineers, tradies, business owners. And we are not about perfection. We're just asking for an effort to avoid unnecessary harm. So humanizing ourselves in this way, rather than trying to elevate ourselves onto an impossibly high pedestal, helps to dissolve that division between vegans and non-vegans. And it starts to dismantle derogation. Now, the third thing that we can do is to reframe veganism as in fact being normal, natural, and necessary. Right? We want to counter those three carnistic claims of veganism being abnormal, unnatural, and unnecessary by letting people see how it's actually the opposite, right? So veganism is normal because most people don't want animals to suffer. Most people share that same view and those same values. So it's actually very normal for people to want to be kind to animals. We can counter the claim of unnatural and showing how veganism is actually very natural indeed, because veganism is very much about a desire for justice and compassion. Okay, so we can very easily demonstrate that most people are capable of empathy, and compassion is really just the combination of empathy and a desire to help. And most people naturally have empathy for non-human animals until they are taught to shut it down. If we can bring their attention to the fact that they are in fact empathetic, compassionate people who also care about justice and want to avoid unnecessary harm, we can show them that what is natural for them is simply what we are putting into action in our lives as vegans. And we can counter the claim of veganism being unnecessary by very easily demonstrating that we can't solve animal suffering, climate collapse, or the public health crisis that we're experiencing around the world without addressing animal agriculture at its root. It is in fact necessary. The science is clearly saying that we need to move towards a plant-based world if we're going to survive on this planet. So the fourth thing we can do is to avoid internalizing the shame that carnism wants us to internalize. It wants us to feel less than, right? So people who feel shamed lack the confidence and the motivation to challenge an unfair system. We have to refuse to carry the shame that doesn't belong to us. So I remind myself, my compassion is not a flaw. My values are not extreme. And I am not the problem. The system is. It does not get to shame me. Our fifth strategy for countering outgroup derogation is building community resilience. And I want to go deeper here because this one is one of the most important and most overlooked aspects of protecting our movement. Carnism doesn't just attack veganism from the outside, it also tries to fracture us from the inside. Oppressive systems have always done this. They know that if they can divide a justice movement from within, then they can weaken it and they can exhaust it and they can distract it from its mission. And carnism is no different. Carnism intentionally plants disruptors inside vegan spaces. People with vested interests in maintaining carnism as the dominant system, whether financially or politically or ideologically, will intentionally insert disruptors into vegan communities. Now, their goal is simple: create conflict. They don't even have to be nice people or win people over, they just need to stir up trouble. They need to trigger emotional reactions. They need to sow distrust, turn people against each other. They need to derail collaboration within and between groups. They need to burn people out. They need to make vegans fight each other instead of the system. This is a classic tactic used against every justice movement in history. Let's not fall for it. They will intentionally exploit the fact that many vegans carry trauma. Most of us are deeply empathic people. Most of us have experienced trauma associated with being vegan, and that might be personal trauma, relational trauma, or trauma from witnessing animal suffering. And carnism knows this. And it knows that trauma makes people more easily triggered, more reactive, more sensitive to perceived injustice, more vulnerable to shame, and more likely to respond in non-relational ways when feeling overwhelmed. So carnism weaponizes this against us. So those trolls that get you so mad in the comments on social media posts, this is what they are doing intentionally. And many of them aren't even real people, just bots set up to exhaust us emotionally, wasting our time and our energy arguing with an algorithm. Again, let's not fall for it. It's not where our energy is best spent. So carnism intentionally sets up situations designed to provoke strong emotional responses from us, and then uses those reactions to portray vegans as unstable and extreme. And when they do this inside our movement, they divide and they weaken us. So let's look out for people inside our movements who seem to be intentionally sowing conflict, shaming people, or using derogatory terms to describe other vegans. They could be agents of carnism planted to intentionally disrupt. They could also just be highly traumatized vegans who struggle to relate to others in healthy ways. Now, either way, we need to respond to them in the same way, which is hold them to agreed standards of respectful communication and relational behavior, and support them to address their trauma if that is what is leading to their harmful actions. Those who are intentionally trying to harm our movement will be quickly weeded out by this process because it makes them ineffective. And those who simply need help to find healthy ways to relate to their fellow vegans will be helped to become more valuable and productive members of the movement. So folks, we need to recognize that no matter our differences in opinion, we are more alike than different. Within the movement, we're all more alike than we are compared to us versus non-vegans, even though we need to be always connecting and welcoming them into our movement. Within the movement, we need to show extra solidarity. So even when vegans disagree about strategy, tactics, messaging, activism styles, the tone that we use, our pace or our urgency, or the priorities that we set to focus on, we share the same core values of compassion, justice, non-violence, and a desire to reduce suffering. Now, carnism wants us to forget this. It wants us to see each other as enemies instead of allies. But we must remember that disagreement is not the same as division, and diversity is not dysfunction. Different approaches are not threats, they are strengths, because different approaches work for different people. So when a fellow vegan says something provocative to you, just pause before reacting. If a vegan appears to say something that is inflammatory or aggressive or shaming or divisive or non-relational, we must keep in mind that they might simply be triggered. They are probably traumatized. They may be feeling emotionally overwhelmed in that moment. They may also be exhausted, or they may in fact not actually be vegan at all and just be there to create trouble. It may be a deliberate attempt to create infighting. Carnism benefits when vegans fight each other. Carnism benefits when vegans burn out. And carnism benefits when vegans lose trust in one another. So we have to refuse to take that bait. We really need to support each other, especially when we disagree. Community resilience for us means assuming good intent when other vegans speak, responding with curiosity instead of defensiveness when we disagree, offering support instead of judgment if we're concerned, grounding ourselves before replying, so checking in with where we are emotionally and not coming from a triggered, emotionally reactive fight or flight lizard brain, remembering that we have a shared mission, seeking to protect each other from burnout, and very importantly, refusing to let anything divide us. So this means saying things like, hey, we're on the same side here, let's remember that. Let's slow down and understand each other right now. We both care about the same things, let's start there. Or, this feels heated right now, let's reconnect to our values. Let's take some time out and come back to this when we're both feeling a little bit calmer, right? Let's check in on how we are relating right now. Are we using respectful language and working towards a common understanding? These are the things we can ask ourselves and each other when conflict arises. A united movement cannot be easily derogated, and that's the point I'm trying to make. Okay, so carnism's derogation tactics rely on portraying us vegans as chaotic, divided, irrational, extreme, and hostile. But when vegans show up in unity, in emotional maturity, using relational communication, supporting each other, and always reverting back to our shared purpose, the carnistic narrative collapses. A resilient community is a shield against derogation. A connected movement is unbreakable. And a united vegan community is a powerful force for justice in the world. Outgroup derogation is powerful, but it is not stronger than the truth. When non-vegans learn the consequences of carnism and what it creates in the world, the cognitive distortions of carnism that they have been subjected to, and the mechanisms that carnism uses to get them to engage in the backlash against vegans, they become capable of making choices that reflect their authentic thoughts and feelings, not what they've been conditioned to believe by carnism. And that is how oppressive systems fall. Awareness creates free choice creates justice, and justice creates change. Veganism is part of that change. We counter carnistic outgroup derogation most effectively by showing up calm, competent, warm, grounded, and connected in conversations, in relationships, in workplaces, on social media, and in community life. That's all I've got, folks. If you're watching on Facebook, I'll be answering your questions and your comments in real time at the appointed time on the Facebook event. Otherwise, if you're on YouTube and you got value from this video, please do like, subscribe, and share with vegans who need to hear this message. And if you do want to join the conversation inside our Facebook community, do come and join Unstoppable Vegans there. Thanks, everyone. Bye.